there, how's it going? Today we're going to talk a little bit about subtractive textures. Now you remember in your drawing that you did from the beginning that you were supposed to have 3 additive textures. Like this example here, I've got 3 added on textures, but you might have noticed that I also have a subtractive texture here, and you might have drawn into your design an area where you wanted to put some textures that are subtractive. So let's talk about that real quick, because there is kind of a right way and a wrong way, and some things that you should be thinking about. So I already took my tile out of my bag. I noticed that the top of my little pyramid here kind of got squished, but that's the great thing about clay, is that you can easily go in and unsquish things if you need to and move them around a little bit. Now, once it starts to dry up, that's when you want to get all your details in there. For what we're doing right now, we're just trying to get the main basic shapes in and try to clean up around your edges. So to do some subtractive things, you have to be aware of how thick your clay is. So if it's already super thin, and then you go in with a tool like this and you start digging designs down into it, you're gonna cut through the clay real fast. Some of you might have already started to notice that the designs you drew into your clay, you might have pressed too hard, and so if you were to pick up your piece of clay and kind of pull it just lightly, you might be able to pull it apart, which is no good. So to make subtractive textures, if you are working with a piece of clay that's already pretty thin, my piece is pretty thin, it is definitely at pinky thickness or thinner, then your subtractive textures need to be really shallow. Nothing that is too deep. Some other things to think about with subtractive textures. You can always add a piece on to become an area that is a little bit thicker so that you can put subtractive textures into it without worrying about it. So yeah, I just killed this piece from yesterday. And this is going to now become an area that has some subtractive textures in it. I'm going to take some pieces out of my bag. You notice I left them in there because I don't want them to dry out too much. So I am going to make this entire triangle area right here an area that is raised up so that I can draw some designs into it without having to worry about carving down in there too deep. So I'm going to take this extra little guy and squish it a little bit flatter so that maybe I can make it a little bit larger. And this is going to become my triangle. So let me show you some stuff you can do with flat things like a credit card. So I can flatten up the sides of things, squish them. If you're trying to flatten something, it's easier to stand up first, and then you can use your full body weight on it if you need to. But if you just need to be gentle with it and make something that is a little bit flat, you don't need to worry about that. If you're using it on the table, you might need to peel it off with something, depending on how humid it is. All right, so here is a piece that works pretty well for my triangle. I'm gonna go for it. Okay, so I'm gonna make it pointy. In fact, I'm just gonna trim that part. All right, a triangle. Now you remember to score and slip, or to score and use water to attach your pieces. With a large flat piece like this, then you really want to make sure that you are doing this right. When you score, you should be making the surface have little scratches all in it, not giant deep gouges. The whole point is that we're trying not to make air bubbles. Okay, both pieces need to have scratches in the surface. Get plenty of water. Both sides. Okay. And I squish, 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 squish until you can see the water squish out. That is what you want. Awesome. Now my triangle is not exactly the right size. size. I need to do some trimming. It's also a little bit smaller than my initial drawing. Oh, I love the announcements.
Ren Clendenin. Ren Clendenin, please come to the front office. Your ride is waiting.
That kid has caused interruptions in my video too many times already, so I'm not redoing it. Okay, so this area right here is a little bit larger than my triangle was, so I'm just going to get rid of that drawing from before. It's okay. Nobody's going to know that it's not exactly the same as what you drew. So now this area is raised up a little bit higher, which means I can start to put subtractive textures in it without being worried about my textures digging down too deep into the clay and causing me issues. And so if you want to make subtractive textures, I would suggest that you give yourself an area that you can put your textures into without having to be scared. So this one right here, you can see they did that in this area and on these. This one, they made eyeballs. And so we've got subtractive on each of these little spheres. And in mine, I put this subtractive texture here, but I went really shallow with it. I just barely poked it into the surface. So some more things to think about with subtractive is that this subtractive stuff going in and out of your bag might end up getting smushed or mushed or something like that. So I like to save my subtractive for last, just in case something starts to get smushed and mushed, so that every single time you take it out of the bag, you don't have to go back and fix it every single time. You can just do that at the end when it's not going in and out of your bag so much. So that is some information about subtractive textures. Keep working on your additive textures. Make sure that you score and slip. Remember that just making one of something does not mean that it is a texture. So whatever you are making, you need multiples in order to count as a texture. So enjoy, have fun, keep making cool things. Make sure you squish it down into the surface real good so that your pieces don't pop off while it's drying or when it is in the kiln.